Hey guys, sorry the stream didn't go live today. We had some streaming issues on YouTube, but we did record the show, and I'm glad we did. I'm going to bring you the details of a New York Times report about JPMorgan Chase's involvement in the Epstein sex scandal. Enjoy.
Why do they doubt the kid? I'm about to prove them all wrong again. I got a low tolerance, cause they don't even know what the problem is. It's me. You waiting on the boy to fail, to hold your breath and face your death. Cause you play a roulette with each step. I progress, no less. Go ahead and place your bets. Cause we know who we at, we know we top tier. Cause all the hate that you bring, we know it stops here. I'm taking off like a rocket here and stopping here. It's strange how they cannot see the future, but see profit here. Wait up, we gon' always win. I can't take no loss. My team hold nowhere else, no. Aiming for the top, can't make it by myself.
All right, welcome, kids. Welcome. I'm flustered. I got a lot of moving parts today. What is today? Today's a Wednesday show. Man, the week's going quick. It's a Wednesday show here on Brett Breaks Things. Thank you for being with me. As usual, appreciate you guys very, very much for tuning in. Now, you're going to have to bear with me a little bit in this first segment. I'm just going to put it out there right now, because I'm going to bring you a story that was hinted to about a month ago. We talked about an investigation, a separate investigation by Ron Wyden and his team into the financial aspect of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring. And he promised there would be more reports. His team would do the digging, and when it's a proper time, what they found would be revealed. And he promised that big name banks would be mentioned, what they did, their culpability would all be revealed. One of those banks that was mentioned was JPMorgan. JPMorgan Chase. Now, 6 years ago, just after Epstein's final arrest, the New York Times sent an investigatory team of David Enrich, Matthew Goldstein, Jessica Silver Greenberg, those three people. They sent them on a quest to uncover what and if JPMorgan had done to facilitate Jeffrey Epstein's crime sex ring. And they found a lot. What they found is so much. It's so much. I'm going to try to bring you the main points. Now, JPMorgan Chase is run by Jamie Dimon. Now, you can look into him and feel how you want to feel about him. I just don't have time to go into Jamie Dimon too much. But during the course of this investigation, he was the CEO of JPMorgan Chase. Now, at the time, two key players were central at the beginning of when this got bad. Just after Epstein got out of house arrest after his sweetheart deal by Alex Acosta, remember that? Which protected him from further federal action and protected his rich friends and protected him from serious federal time. Well, he was still a sex offender. Okay, that's the part of the deal that didn't work out as well for Mr. Epstein. He was still a sex offender, registered sex offender. And because of that, JPMorgan Chase wanted to sit down with him. You see, Epstein already had around $200 million in his accounts in JPMorgan Chase when this went down back in 2011. When he got out, he went to meet with them. Now, Stephen Cutler, he was the general counsel for JPMorgan Chase at the time, a guy named Stephen Cutler. He used to be a federal securities regulator. He was the guy who was tasked with keeping it tight, legal, above board at JPMorgan Chase. It was his job. And there was a high-up executive named Jess Staley. Now, Jess Staley was good friends with Jeffrey Epstein by this time. Okay, Jess Staley has lent him money, given him confidential insider information, allowed Epstein to set up several accounts. And with those accounts, over the years, millions of dollars in transactions, large transactions, had taken place from Jeffrey's accounts. Large cash withdrawals. His various companies and accounts would write a check to him or to someone else for cash, and they would withdraw large amounts of cash. This is the basis for what JPMorgan Chase did wrong. The basis. And that particular aspect, his large cash withdrawals, was again and again brought up by various executives as to a reason why we shouldn't be doing business with Jeffrey Epstein. And that was what was brought up at this meeting. But Staley went to bat for Epstein, pointed at the millions of dollars that he has brought into their bank, kind of personally vouched for him. Okay? Now, the behavior continued this whole time. Large cash withdrawals to young women. This is provable. This isn't alleged. Large cash withdrawals to young women, but cash withdrawals to other places. But Epstein was very valuable. Okay? He was very valuable. Even Prime Minister Ehud Barak called him a collector of people. He was so adept at trading favors for gossip, for advice, for meetings, for info between the richest of the rich globally. That's what he did. He had been described by some of them as omniscient. He knew everything about everybody and what to do with their money. Okay? Epstein was allowed to stay at the bank. There was one withdrawal in particular, $175,000 cash withdrawal that was made out to a young woman. Okay? That was paid out to a young woman. And within JPMorgan Chase, there are apparatus in place to flag a transaction like that, because transactions like that are the hallmark of sex trafficking operations. They raise the biggest red flags the earliest amongst mega banks like this. They've been doing this a long time, and they have people in positions that know what it looks like, and they ignored it, and they ignored it, and they ignored it. At one point, he had asked the bank to give a loan to one, remember this name? Jean-Luc Brunei. I mentioned him yesterday. He was in that book. Jean-Luc, he started that modeling agency with that money. You know, the one that eventually was found to facilitate him drugging, trafficking, and raping women. He was then found guilty and committed suicide in a federal prison. That Jean-Luc Brunei. He couldn't have gotten started without JPMorgan Chase and Jeffrey Epstein. Couldn't even have gotten started. Epstein, he brought the biggest whales to the table for Morgan Chase. And they allowed this behavior to continue. Mainly because of the influence of Jess Staley. Keep that name in your mind, Jess Staley. At one point, he brought Stanley Brin, the co-founder of Google. He opened a $4 billion account with JPMorgan Chase. He brought to the table, the Gates. He brought a lot of people to the table, big names to the table. One of the names he brought to the table was a $7 billion hedge fund manager, Glenn Dubin. Glenn Dubin ran a $7 billion hedge fund called Highbridge Capital Management. Dubin's wife used to date Epstein, and now they're all buddies. And Epstein was even godfather to this woman's son. She's a former Miss Sweden, Eva Anderson. Former Miss Sweden. He's godfather to her son. Pictures of her and her son are all over his properties. He even left a huge stake in his estate, in his will to her, which, to her credit, she said, I don't want a piece of it. She rejected it. Once everything came to light, she rejected it. But Epstein brought this whale to the table. Well, shortly after this meeting, they started JPMorgan Chase bought a majority stake in that hedge company, $1.3 billion majority stake, shortly after Epstein got them together. Epstein introduces these two people to Staley. Staley brings it to Diamond. They invest $1.3 billion in this hybrid capital. And Staley called it the most important transaction in my professional career. It vaulted him to number 2 in the company. He was now CEO in waiting, basically. And for Epstein, that netted him a cool $15 million as a part of the deal for basically a discovery fee, right? Just a few months after that, he brings a new client to JPMorgan Chase, one Ghislaine Maxwell. And he asks Staley, hey, can you just help me out and open this new account for Ghislaine? Don't worry about, due diligence. Don't worry about her financial background. I'm telling you, this is a good idea. And he's done this before. He opened accounts for some of the women he trafficked with JPMorgan Chase, opened accounts for them. And in one of the cases, the woman couldn't even produce identification. In another case, they didn't even meet one of the women. And they opened bank accounts for these women. Whatever you want, Jeffrey. Now you want this Ghislaine Maxwell to get a new account? No problem. It's going to be your cash. And it was. He infused $7.4 million into this new Ghislaine Maxwell account. And what did she do? She bought helicopters to fly people to Little St. James with that money. Yep. He was arrested in 2006 on charges of solicitation of prostitution, and they met again. All the heads got together again. We got to do something about this. This is a liability. This looks terrible. And there was Staley once again. Hey, Jeffrey's shaken by this. He adamantly denies he did anything wrong. He's being railroaded. At the same time, by the way, they were already dealing with that Wesley Snipes thing, and they had to kick Wesley Snipes out of their bank. They were already dealing with like high-profile bad optics, and so this came at a terrible time. But didn't matter. Ultimately, it was decided. And by the way, Jamie Dimon says specifically, I had no hand in this decision-making. None of this was brought to my desk personally. I didn't I didn't sign off on any of this. Him staying, the accounts, this was all handled by Staley and the people under me. Keep that clear. They allowed him to continue to do business at this bank, even after his arrest in 2006. They allowed him to do business. And that prompted the meeting in 2011. He was allowed to stay. He was allowed to stay. He was allowed to stay time and time again. But it gets even seedier. It gets even seedier as this guy Staley started to really ingratiate himself into Jeffrey Epstein's orbit, his life, his universe. He became a close friend. He became a close friend. More than a close friend. It looks like he became one of those kind of Epstein friends. Oh, yeah. When I started this story, and you start to hear about the horrible, inappropriate way that JPMorgan Chase went about their business in regards to Epstein, you're thinking this is a financial matter. This is an eyes closed because he's bringing us so much money matter, right? And it is. But you didn't think that it could possibly connect itself to the seedy underbelly of this Epstein tragedy, which is the abuse of young women, the trafficking of young women, and yet it does. It does. Executives have said, we don't want him. We don't want him in the building. We don't want his accounts. How can this be continued to go forward? But it ultimately fell on this guy, Jess Staley. Jess Staley allowing Epstein's malfeasance to be facilitated by this bank.
It's time for a quick break, then we break some more. You're listening to Brett Breaks Things. You're back with Brett Breaks Things, because democracy doesn't defend itself.
Okay, So let's get to the down and dirty. Let's get to the real ugly part of this story. Now, I opened this with a 2011 meeting to decide Epstein's future. And all this stuff played out leading up to this meeting. Okay? All the stuff that I've described played out leading up to this meeting in 2011. The meeting had Cutler there, Staley, Jess Staley, Cutler, general counsel, a guy named Wyatt Langford, who was head of compliance. All were at this meeting. Not Jamie Dimon, though. Not Mr. Dimon. Okay, so here's more events leading up to this. This may lead to the source of Jess Staley's unwavering loyalty to Jeffrey Epstein. Okay? Now, I had described to you already the money he made, the accounts he brought, the information he provided went both ways. Lots of it market sensitive. Lots of it market sensitive. But here may be the source of the loyalty. Two events in particular. In 2009, while Epstein was under house arrest, he was at his sprawling ranch, Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, and Staley came to visit. Now, this ranch was discussed as a compound or a venue that Epstein used to traffic and inseminate women, to seed the human race with his DNA. I'm not making this up. That was apparently the purpose of this ranch. And sex trafficking, rape, abuse allegedly took place at this ranch, according to victims, depositions, reports, accounts. Staley went to visit him there. Okay? Now, when he went home, they emailed each other while Epstein was sipping wine in the hot tub. And Epstein wrote, next time we're here together, Staley emailed Epstein. Staley emailed to Epstein, next time we're together, I owe you much. Further messages after that were littered with sexual references to what had happened. He said, that was fun. Say hi to Snow White. Epstein responded by asking which character would he like next, and he replied, Beauty and the Beast. Honestly, just painful. Just painful. Painful. So, the other event. One time, Staley went to visit Jeffrey Epstein in his New York townhouse. And Staley had a conversation with a woman in her 20s. Since then, in the future, from that meeting, she sued Jeffrey and won a class action lawsuit that was settled for abuse, okay, that went on for about a dozen years with this woman, particularly. And she said that in that suit, she alleged that Trump forced her and other victims to engage in commercial sex with certain select friends. That's who this woman is. Jeffrey Epstein met with Staley, and Staley had a conversation with this woman. He then arranged for her to come to his apartment. Not his apartment, I'm sorry. Epstein's brother's apartment. There was an arrangement that Staley would go to Epstein's brother's apartment and this woman would meet him there. They had a drink, and in less than 15 minutes they were upstairs, had sex, and he was gone back to his job later that day. By the way, Staley married. And he actually acknowledged in a deposition that he had sex with this woman. But he said, it's the only time I've ever had a sexual encounter related with Jeffrey Epstein in any way. That's what he asserted in a deposition. So when you look at where his undying loyalty for Jeffrey Epstein comes from, I mean, yes, it's the money, it's the power, it's the influence, it's the information. But man, is it yet another high-powered mover and shaker that has ended up in his web of sex trafficking, lies, deceit, abuse? Is he another big name, like ones that may be revealed if things continue on the course that they are? And I will get to that, I promise you. Is he just another big name just embroiled in all of this and bringing JPMorgan Chase down with him? So they had this meeting. Lankford was there in 2011. Cutler was there. Lankford, head of compliance. Cutler, general counsel. Jess Staley, number 2 in command. And Jeffrey Epstein and a couple others. And Staley, man, he went to bat. He gave Jeffrey Epstein his say. Epstein said, I can assure you that nothing like this will ever happen in the future. I can assure you that our business is safe and will be lucrative and fruitful. And Lankford wasn't convinced. But Staley, Lankford's boss, said, listen, why don't you have a meeting with Epstein's lawyer and then make a decision? Who was Epstein's lawyer? Ken Starr. Remember that name, Ken Starr? Yeah. Former special prosecutor, prosecuted Bill Clinton for a sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky. That Ken Starr? Ken Starr said, I got all my points in. I said there was no crimes. Inappropriate behavior, yes, said Ken Starr, but a criminal, no. And Ken Starr went on to brag about the merits of Jeffrey Epstein. And Lankford backed off. Diamond chose not to get involved. Cutler backed off. And Staley got his buddy back in the good graces of JPMorgan Chase. We're talking after the Acosta deal, after millions in large cash transfers to young women who were later proven to be embroiled in Jean-Luc Bernay's modeling sex trafficking agency, and other women who later brought charges against Epstein, won class action lawsuits, cash withdrawal after cash withdrawal after cash withdrawal. Of all the banks in the world, there are only a few that should be as adept to red flagging federal crimes committed using their bank better than anybody else. They should be better at it than anybody else. And they are. They chose to ignore the signs time and time and time again, with Jess Staley as the main facilitator of Epstein's business with the bank continuing. It did come to a head. Eventually. In 2016, in 2019, approximately 6-7 years ago in 2019, when Epstein was arrested, that was it. That was that. Leading up to that, his main defender, Jess Staley, got looked over for the CEO job, got passed over for the CEO job at JPMorgan Chase, and eventually left the bank. His shield gone. Shortly after that, the arrest. Do they coincide for any particular reason? Nothing is clear on that. But when his shield at JPMorgan Chase was gone, and boy, did Jess Staley apologize and try to explain to Jeffrey his position, that was a big blow for Mr. Epstein. He was forced to withdraw what he had at the time, I think $176 million still with JPMorgan Chase. That had to go over to Deutsche Bank. Shortly after that, Deutsche Bank, in the light of the arrests and what came out after those arrests, they ended up paying out $100 million settlement just for taking his secondhand business. They didn't get the message. They apparently didn't have an in at JPMorgan Chase. Nobody was there to hip Deutsche Bank to what exactly was going on with this guy, and they took his business, and they paid. They paid big time. Now, JPMorgan Chase, after the fact, once the arrest happened, JPMorgan Chase then released all the records, almost 5,000 transactions, equaling close to $1 billion at that point, that could be flagged as a part of a sex trafficking operation. After the fact, it covered their butt a little bit, but not enough. They ended up paying $290 million in a settlement to the victims for their part in this sex trafficking operation. And there is more. I mean, this was just, I only had a little under a half hour to bring you some of these details. This was a 17-page investigatory article by the New York Times. These reporters did such an amazing job. Years of investigating this. Years. Now, I know you're interested about this story. How could you not be? How far does it stretch? What else did JPMorgan green light and not disclose? What else did Jess Staley facilitate in terms of Epstein's sex trafficking? How much did he know exactly? What did he do? You're not the only one who wants to know. You're not the only one who wants to know.
Have you heard about in July how Senator Wyden announced that the Treasury Department has
She is talking, by the way, to Andrea
reports on
Gacki.
Jeffrey Epstein's financial network detailing, I think, thousands of transactions totaling one point.
Let me pause her. This is Rashid Tlaib grilling Andrea Gacki, who is an attorney and currently serves as the director of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is a bureau within the U.S. Treasury Department. And she is tasked with combating financial crimes. And Rashid Tlaib gets with her, man.
$5 billion.
Thank you, Representative Tlaib. I am familiar with Senator Wyden's communications.
Yep. Are you among the largest transactions are two that JPMorgan Chase reported with Russian banks for as much as $100 million? Are you aware of that one?
I'm aware of Senator Wyden's communication, yes.
Can you tell the committee more in regards to, yesterday it was revealed that, just yesterday, that Chase employees knew of these suspicious transactions for more than a decade and they were ignored. Are you familiar with that?
Well, I thank you, Representative Tlaib, for these questions. And given the sensitivity of the data that we obtain through the Bank Secrecy Act, to include these SARs, I want to assure you that Treasury is taking this very seriously.
But we, as committee members, can we have access to that information? It should be public, correct?
This is highly sensitive.
Can you be subpoenaed for the records?
We are working with Representative Comer to ensure that we provide.
Okay. Well, I'm going to yield the rest of my time, Director, to my ranking member, Beatty. She'd like to put a motion because I think Financial Services Committee should also have oversight in regards to any banking institution. As somebody that serves on oversight, sat at a round table with girls that were as young as 13 years old who asked us to follow the money. And I think it's our responsibility as members of Congress to do that.
I move that this committee issue a subpoena to the Secretary of Treasury to return to the majority and minority of the Subcommittee on National Security, Illicit Finance, and International Financial Institutions of the Committee on Financial Services and the Committee on Financial Services, all complete and unredacted documents related to Jeffrey Epstein or individuals and entities associated with Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay. So they are asking for a subpoena into JPMorgan Chase, and they are asking it from Comer. James Comer. This James Comer. This is the guy that they're looking to for more transparency into what Epstein did. This is the guy. When asked about those Trump signatures, you want to hear what James Comer had to say? You remember the Trump signatures I showed you yesterday? 8 individual signatures, identical. Only one of them Trump won't claim. Yeah, this is what he had to say about it.
He did not sign it, so I take the president at his word. I don't think the Oversight Committee is going to invest in looking up something 22 years ago. We're going to look.
So you're just going to take the president at his word that this is not
What does it have to do with anything?
What does it have to do with anything? We're looking to you for transparency? You're not even interested in him lying to the American people about a signature that was clearly his in a disgusting book as a gift to a disgusting man? You're not interested? Are you kidding?
We'll be back to break it all down. You're listening to Brett Breaks Things. Brett breaks things, where the stakes are high and the truth still matters.
You're a prosecutor, you're a lawyer here. There's this
I would
defamation.
say we have lots of reasons to think he was involved in wrongdoing. I mean, at this point, there's a lot of smoke. There may be some fire, but I would just push back and say I think there's a lot of reason to think Donald Trump was involved.
Involved with what? I'm sorry, what exactly, what proof do you have that he was involved with wrongdoing in regards to Jeffrey Epstein? And if that's the case, why have there been no prosecutions over 20 years here? Because there haven't really been any allegations that he was involved with wrongdoing.
There are a lot of connections where Donald Trump was named, right? We had a 14-year-old claiming that she was raped by him, then withdrew that claim after she was apparently threatened. His name appears a lot. And again, we at this point, our job is to find justice for these survivors, and that means that we need to continue digging, knowing that there is a cover-up taking place right now. And I didn't say that we have proof. At this point, we have like a lot of smoke. But Donald Trump's name is clearly mentioned multiple times. We've seen him lie over and over about things that we now know to be true. So again, I think that we, as the Oversight Committee, we owe an obligation to the girls, the American people out there, to keep digging and find out the truth, whoever's involved.
Now, he's on the Oversight Committee. That's Rep. Min. He's on the Oversight Committee. He'll have a say. He'll see some of this stuff. He'll have a say. But you heard what Comer had to say about those signatures. He's not interested. We'll see how this plays out. He's also talking about continuing digging. He's leaning on Kana and Massey and that discharge petition. That's what he's talking about, really. That's what he's talking about, really. And by the way, a little bow on that story with JPMorgan Chase. There was another person in another firm, one Catherine Rumler. She was Goldman Sachs general counsel. And for some reason, she was named as a backup executor on Epstein's will. This is something that needs to possibly be dug into. When he's talking about digging, they might have to dig into this a little bit. She was named executor of his will. Now, she was in contact with him dozens of times, dozens of meetings, and even more contact after he was a registered sex offender. So after the Acosta deal, this woman had a ton of contact with him. A ton. And it's not clear what they discussed. It's not clear the nature of their relationship. But he eventually named her successor executor. Now, just before his suicide, he changed it. And he named two other executors, Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn. They both got $250,000 each for doing this. And it's not clear exactly why he changed it at the last second. Now, she says, I have nothing to do with the estate and have never served in any capacity relating to the estate. Boom. That's what she says. But Goldman Sachs is bracing for impact. They might know something, or maybe it's just the optics. You see, she has a role on the firm's reputational risk committee. And she has a deciding voice on who they work with, whose accounts they open, and who they don't. You can see how that's an optics problem for Goldman Sachs, and they are bracing in for impact, but they say Kathy's legal judgment is widely respected, and she has always put the interest of the firm first. Do some digging. You did great digging, New York Times, on the JPMorgan Sachs. Let's start digging on that one. Why was this woman, who became great friends with him just after his charges, an executor of his will, and then mysteriously taken off at the last second? Do your digging. And some digging we may be on the cusp of a discovery, not just digging. We may have found something. We may be close to hitting pay dirt with that digging. Talking about Kana and Massey. Okay, talking about Kana and Massey and their discharge petition. Okay. Now, the Trump administration and the DOJ released that 30,000 file first tranche, that initial tranche, which they say there will be some to follow. It didn't go quite as they planned. They wanted it to be a look at us, we're cooperating, we have nothing to hide move, right? That's what the move indicated. But then This Epstein birthday book turned over by the Epstein estate in conjunction with this release of files, this has not gone well. Now he's answering new questions. Now we've got a hold of that signature, the note, the details. Pretty tough, even for the most ardent Trump supporter, to explain this stuff away. He said there was no book. He sued the Washington Post over this. He sued them for their, which one, Scotty? Wall Street Journal, not the Washington Post. Thank you, Scotty. He sued the Wall Street Journal over this, saying, your reporting indicates there's a birthday book I signed. There's no book. Doesn't exist. Well, now the book does exist. And in the book is a signature of yours, which matches all of your signatures. Trump was hoping that this would cool down Roe and Tom and their supporters and this discharge petition. They were hoping it would take steam out of it. Well, no. They are emboldened. Look what this amount of pressure has uncovered. Just this amount of pressure has uncovered this book. What else could possibly be uncovered? Trump has failed to suppress this book and his signature, and now he's answering tough questions. He failed. Failed. What other attempts at suppression has he failed at or may fail at if pressure continues? That's going to embolden these guys to continue to apply that pressure. Where else are we going to see signs of cracking in this administration, in Trump's posture? Well, we may be on the cusp of a big step being taken. Big step. Because they claim they're at 218 signatures. They've got 4 Republicans on board. There were more before the recess. There were more. Since the recess, some peeled back. Some peeled back, right? Pressure breaks pipes. We're talking about pressure, and pressure broke the back of some of these Republicans, and they caved and they came off. They were sponsors of the petition when it was written, and now they won't co-sign it. What do you think happened there? But 4 remain. 4 remain. Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and Nancy Mace. They remain. And there may be some backup coming. There may be some backup coming. James Walkinshaw, a Democrat, and the chief of staff of the former representative in a North Virginia district, a Gerald E. Connolly. Gerald died. James Walkinshaw was his chief of staff. He ran against the Republican in a special election in that district, and if he wins, he has promised to sign the Massey discharge petition. Also, in 2 weeks, Adelita Grijalva is expected to win a special election because her father, a 12-term rep, Raul Grijalva, died. It was her father. He died. She's expected to win his seat in a special election in Arizona. That could be 2 more. That could be 2 more. Now, keep in mind, if the discharge petition gets enough signatures and forces the vote right down Mike Johnson's throat, and they win, it does not guarantee that the Justice Department will agree to the discharge petition. They can decline. They can decline. I want you to understand this. This petition isn't the be-all, end-all of this issue. Now, some people could go down over this. Some people could lose their careers over this, their seats over this. One person that would be squarely in the crosshairs is Pam Bondi, because if the DOJ decides to decline the discharge petition, the vote that is subsequent to the discharge petition, the vote passes, she can say no. She can personally say no. You can guarantee that's going to be the order, the directive given from dear leader Trump. And when she says no, then it's back on the House, and they will then be forced with the decision to sorry about that, to get her out of power. I'm struggling at the word. Impeach her. Hello. I'm sorry. So the House would then have the option to impeach Pam Bondi from her position at the DOJ. They would have to vote on that. Even though a Republican may sign the discharge petition or vote for it, that doesn't mean that they will vote to impeach Pam Bondi. I hate to be the one to break this to you. I don't know if you had heard this long game from anybody else, but that could be where this discharge petition dies. That could be where it dies. The vote goes forward, DOJ says middle finger, and it's onto the House to impeach the head of the DOJ. That's a heavy lift. But there's good news. I said that James Walkinshaw is expected to win the vote. He did win it. He did win it. I baited you a little bit. He already won it. Okay, so he is going to take Connolly's seat. Now, just before he takes Connolly's seat, when we talk in terms of overall House majority and power by Mike Johnson, right now, Republicans have a 219 to 212 seat breakdown. But Walkinshaw comes in. Gravja comes in. And all of a sudden, the numbers start to change a little bit. Okay? And there's more. Okay, so Grijalva comes in Arizona. Walkinshaw comes in Virginia. There's also the issue of Sylvester Turner, a Democrat out of Texas. He died. And that is expected to be replaced by a Democrat. That's 3 more to the Democrat side. With those 3, that makes 215. 215. Now, Mark Green in Tennessee also died. He's a Republican. That seat's not accounted for. But we expect that all 3 of these Democratic seats will be filled before Greens is voted on in December. So we may not need as many Republicans as we thought. Okay, so if we're talking about, we're talking about overall majority. Once those 3 get in their seat, that'll be 219 to 215. When talking about this discharge petition, he's saying they only need 218 for this. They have 4 Republicans right now. So take 4 off that. 215 to 215. That means he only has to flip 1 more. If they can flip 1 more before December, before Mark Green's seat is filled, just 1 more, and they can get the discharge petition to move forward and jam it right down Mike Johnson's throat and force the DOJ to either release all of it, everything in the investigation right now, unredacted right now, or officially say, no, we're not going to do that. The DOJ of transparency, Pam Bondi, one of the proponents of release everything. You remember Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, showing off in front of the White House with all these files with right-wing influencers. We've got them. We've got the files. We're going to expose the perverts. We're going to expose the criminals. Let's put it right back in her hands, right back in her lap. What are you going to do then, Pam? You're going to do the will of the American people?
Breaking politics, breaking narratives, breaking news. But first, we need a coffee break. Breaking news, breaking rules, breaking through. Back to Brett Breaks Things.
The Supreme Court says it will weigh in on whether President Donald Trump can impose his sweeping tariffs. And the timeline is moving fast. The High Court agreed to the Trump administration's request for an expedited schedule. That means the justices will hear arguments in the tariffs case starting in the first week of November. Let's bring in CBS News reporter Torian Small live for us this evening. Torian, this really sets the stage for a major legal showdown. So what can we expect and what's at stake here?
Yeah, well, to that second question, according to the U.S. Solicitor General, this is, in his words, the most important and significant economic and foreign policy initiative. The Trump administration believes that that's what at stake here, the president's power to really broker these deals abroad and essentially secure U.S. national security through it. The timeline here has been what's really is significant. Just last week is when we got that federal court appeals court decision essentially blocking or affirming a lower court's decision to block Trump's tariffs. The only difference here is that federal court decided, the appeals court decided rather, instead of allowing this block to happen immediately, they would hold off until October to essentially give the administration room to establish the basis for this. At the heart of this is whether or not the president can tap into his emergency powers to go above the power of Congress. It's Congress who not only holds the power of the purse, but also the ability to enforce or levy these tariffs. So for the president to do it, although Congress has essentially in the past allowed some power to go to the president, is why this case is essentially being picked up by the Supreme Court nowadays. Now, the timeline for this would see the Supreme Court take up arguments in November, and then sometime after that is when we should expect a decision.
All right, let's talk about the effect that Project 2025 is having, the disease of Project 2025. Let's talk about it, because this last segment is dedicated to the weaponization of the Supreme Court. The Heritage Foundation handpicked Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh. They now have an extreme, sycophantic majority on the Supreme Court. And if you want to start to see the effects of that, here they come. Here they come. Here come the effects of the Supreme Court being lost to fascism. That's a little extreme. But again, when I start to bring up fascism and authoritarianism, it's getting less and less extreme to have that conversation, I feel. I feel like many of you feel that way as well. So let's talk about it. Now, you know that in February, he declared an emergency using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and sweeping tariffs. Sweeping tariffs. Now, he is the first president ever in the 50-year history of that act being written that has ever enabled it, that has ever used it. He's the first one. First one. And the Yale Budget Lab says that's what people are going by generally for this number, that it's going to cost the average American $2,400 a year, these tariffs. So, a group of businessmen, I'm going to let you know how this played out. I'm going to let you know how this played out. So, a group of small businessmen and along with some states, filed separate lawsuits against the tariffs in April. Okay, some business owners and states themselves filed lawsuits. They said it would cause widespread economic harm. Okay, they called it a power grab. They said, quote, Congress, not the president alone, has the constitutional power to impose tariffs. This is from an attorney of some of the plaintiffs. They argued that this is in violation of the Supreme Court's own major questions doctrine. Okay, relating to the emergency status. There is a high court established doctrine called the major questions doctrine. Established in 2022, it was dealing with the EPA's ability to regulate greenhouse gases. Okay, and it requires that the president have explicit authorization by Congress to regulate issues of great economic or political significance. That's what the major questions doctrine established. And this Supreme Court thought it was really cute to use that doctrine against Biden as he blocked a $400 billion student loan initiative. They curbed carbon dioxide emissions and imposed vaccine mandates. And on some businesses during the pandemic. They blocked a lot of economic initiatives by Joe Biden. They thought it was real cute to use the major questions doctrine in that capacity. So these plaintiffs say, by that doctrine, he needs to go through Congress for emergency authorization. A 3-panel judge of the Specialized Court of International Trade in New York agreed with them. This was in May. They said, we do not read the IEEPA to delegate an unbounded tariff authority to the president. We instead read the IEEPA's provision to impose meaningful limits on any such authority it confers. So a 3-panel Specialized Court of International Trade agreed with the plaintiffs. Then the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit got involved. They paused that international court, the international court decision. They paused it, and they said, we're going to give the administration a chance to appeal this, make their argument. And they did. And last month, that appeals court made a 7-4 decision that Trump had overstepped his authority. Overstepped. They said, quote, the statute bestows significant authority on the president to undertake a number of actions in response to a declared national emergency, but none of these actions explicitly include the power to impose tariffs, duties, or the like, or the power to tax. Absent a valid delegation by Congress, the president has no authority to impose taxes, which is essentially what this tariff is. So, the International Court's decision was upheld by the Federal Circuit Appeals Court. So now, the Trump administration has asked this Supreme Court to quickly make a decision about this. Okay, they want him to make a decision. And the Supreme Court has brought all of the cases, all the individual cases of the business owners in the states, and another lawsuit brought by 2 educational toy makers who claim the tariffs will force them to raise prices and could devastate sales. All those cases have been brought together, and they're all going to have arguments, and they're going to make a decision, and this will be a big one. What does your gut tell you they're going to decide? What does your gut tell you they're going to decide? Because I know what my gut tells me they're going to decide about that. I know what my gut tells me. You want to hear more about the Supreme Court? Let's keep it moving. Let's keep it rolling. And we're going to talk about Chief Justice Roberts in particular. We're going to talk about Chief Justice Roberts in particular. Now, you remember the pocket rescission, right? You remember that? We talked about that a couple weeks ago. It's when the president wants to block funding for something and has 45 days to block it while Congress decides on the president's request. The president requests, hey, this funding right here I don't agree with. It's not in line with my my ideals, whatever I hold dear, and so I want to block this money right here. He gets to block it for 45 days. Congress decides whether that has merit or not. And then they go with that decision. Either they uphold the president's request to block the money and it has to get reappropriated elsewhere, or they say that it has no merit, the funding continues. But if the president does that with 44 days or less to the end of the budget, well, that's called a pocket rescission, because then he effectively blocks it for the life of it. They can't extend it, approve it, refund it. They can't do anything for 45 days. If there's only 44 days left in the budget, well, guess what? It's done. It's killed. And that's what he did to the USAID. I told you that. $4.5 billion in funding. Now, last week, Judge Amir Ali of the Federal District Court in Washington ruled that the president has given no justification to displace the bedrock expectation that Congress's appropriations must be followed. He's saying you're cutting Congress out of the decision. You're unilaterally taking this $4.5 billion away from USAID, and he ordered that the administration must allow the funds to flow. That was last week. Yay. for 1 week. Chief Justice Roberts on Tuesday paused that federal judge's ruling. Paused it. John Sauer, the Solicitor General and Trump soldier, told the court that the judge's the judge's order requiring the administration to spend this $4.5 billion in payments at the end of the month raised grave and urgent threat to the separation of powers. He argues that you're forcing a president to force through funds that he doesn't approve of at a breakneck speed, is the word he used, at a breakneck speed. You're forcing him to have these funds go through when he doesn't want them to go through, and he put forth the proper paperwork to stop it. That it's not his fault that it came 44 days or less of the end of the budget. You can't make him force through funds at a breakneck speed that he doesn't approve of. And Judge Roberts agreed with him. Judge Roberts agreed with him. Now, in his agreement, in this pausing of the federal judge's ruling, he did note that the proposal is known as a pocket rescission, and it is legally untested. It's a legally untested way to claw back appropriated money by waiting so late in the fiscal year to make the request that lawmakers do not have time to reject it before the funding expires. He noted it in there. Like, look, I'm not stupid. I know this is a pocket rescission. I know what that is. And it's legally untested, and maybe someday we'll make a decision on that. But until we do, Trump can take the money away. Trump can take the money away. That was Justice Roberts' decision unilaterally. Unilaterally. Justice Roberts did something else. I mean, they have been ruling for this guy time and time again. Time and time again they rule for him. This time, it concerned Trump firing somebody off the Federal Trade Commission. Okay? He fired a person named Slaughter. What was her name? Oh, Rebecca Slaughter. Thank you. There it is, Scott. Scott was just telling me, you got to get the details, bud. You got to clean it up. He's right. He's right. Rebecca Slaughter was fired by Trump. By Trump. With no cause given. Just fired. She's a Democrat. Off the FTC. Now she said, I intend to see this case through to the end. She had briefly been able to return to her job as a result of a lower court ruling, which is why Roberts stepped in. And he didn't offer any reason, by the way. He didn't offer any reason. Without cause, fired. And there is a statute concerning FTC. And it says commissioners can only be removed for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance. She has done none of this, but yet Roberts has allowed it to continue. She said, in the week I was back at the FTC, it became even more clear to me that we desperately need the transparency and accountability that Congress intended to have at the bipartisan independent agencies. Now, this removal is there is precedent, okay? This removal flies in the face of a direct challenge of a high court ruling, a Supreme Court ruling in 1935, okay? It's known as the Humphreys Executor ruling. And the administration says it doesn't apply anymore because 1935 was so long ago that our government and the FTC itself has changed too much to be held to this 1935 Humphreys Executor ruling. Our government's changed too much. Executive power has grown since then. And the president does have the right to do this. And Justice Roberts agrees with them. Justice Roberts agrees with them. Now, this, in conjunction with the Lisa Cook firing from the Fed Governor Board, I mean, they are hand in hand. They are hand in hand. Now, this firing doesn't exactly pave the way straight to cause for Lisa Cook, the right for Trump to unilaterally fire Lisa Cook. But I'll tell you right now, Lisa Cook being fired, if that holds up by the Supreme Court, and it's going to get there, then this FTC firing will fall And every other firing going forward will be acceptable by the Supreme Court. He will have absolute carte blanche to fire whoever he wants, whenever he wants, for whatever reason he wants. So they don't need this firing to go through to justify Lisa Cook's. But if Lisa Cook's goes through, this will certainly hold, and every other firing after it. And every other firing after it. Now, a judge did rule, the judge in Washington did rule that Lisa Cook can stay in her position until this case is decided by the Supreme Court. So they have a race. Because 16th and 17th, the Fed govs meet. They're going to discuss interest rates. Trump is on a quest to have a majority on that board. Jerome Powell's out in May. Stephen Miron, he has been passed through to a vote to the Senate. His confirmation is now going to be a vote to the Senate. He has passed through the committees. He's going forward. Even though he said he's going to stay on the Council of Economic Advisors, he said he's not going to quit. He's going to keep that job, and he's going to go to the Fed board. Jack Reed and others said, we're going to challenge that. But it remains, Miron's going in. Lisa Cook could be going out. They could soon have 4. Not only could they have 4 soon, with Jerome Powell out in May, they will have a majority on the board to pick the new chair. That could be game over.
They'll try to repair the narrative, but Brett Breaks Things will be back tomorrow to break it all down.